about to have even more fun because a good friend of the show, he's appeared on EP many times over the years because he's worked on lots of cool games. He's got something new to tell us about, but this guy's history includes SSX, NBA Street, FIFA, FreetoPlay baseball, Swatch, Sega, all kinds of incredible stuff. Please welcome Steve Rechtschaffner. Come on up, my friend. Good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, Victor.
Looking good, my friend. Grab a seat. Steve, you reached out and you said, I might have something cool to talk about. And I said, well, you were fantastic the last time we had you on. I think it was about a year and a bit ago. And we reminisced, I think, mostly about SSX. And what got me thinking about that was that SSX 3 became a playable game on the Xbox backward compatibility list.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just amazing to get back into it. And I was so, floored to have you back on. So we talked a lot about SSX. And then you had a reunion.
Yeah, we did.
Has there been a little bit more, buzz or a little bit more discussion about the days of EA Sports Big in the last little while?
Yeah, there's been a lot of different kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
When you and I spoke last time, actually I think it was the conversation we had off camera.
Yeah.
Where we were just talking about some of these really interesting things going on with streaming games coming kind of around the corner and new business models coming in, like free-to-play on console and PC. And that was before we saw monsters like Apex and those things coming. But it's been interesting. And then, as you mentioned last fall, I had a reunion at my house, and a big chunk of the team from the early SSX Tricky, and SSX 3 teams came by, and it was great to see a lot of people I hadn't seen for a long time, and some of them have gone on to do amazing things in game space, and some of them have gone on to do other crazy creative stuff. But there was a theme to it all, which was people who worked on it felt like they were part of making something special.
Yeah.
And they felt like it was an experience where they could really express their creativities for a lot of them in ways they hadn't been able to since. And that really inspired me. And, reconnecting with you, and actually you had pointed me to some things that other people had been saying. A lot of people are really passionate on the internet with videos about, what happened to SSX, what happened to Street Volume 2,
Yeah.
And, some of those pieces that people have done have been really insightful and interesting, but way more inspiring are the comments.
Yeah.
And, the things that these games meant to people, and the way they touched people in a way maybe a little differently than other games have. And, I was never excited about the idea of bringing something back for retro sense, but what really got me going was the idea of being able to stream games and instantly be able to play something I might be curious about. The idea of new business models where I might not have to pay money up front. It might be part of a subscription, or it might be free to play initially.
Right.
And all those things made way for what I've always really fought for in games, which is make games that are super accessible, really appealing on the surface.
Yeah.
Kind of like a good pop song.
Yeah.
And let the merits of the game decide whether you keep playing or not.
Yeah.
So that kind of got me up to some recent things I've been thinking about.
Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the days at working at Electronic Arts, or do you want to just sort of reveal a little bit about what's cooking right now?
Well, I'll tell you what I can share with you today.
Okay, good.
Which is really the confluence of all those things I've just been talking about. I think create an opportunity to introduce a new style of game and a new kind of game that's absolutely built on the back of competition.
Awesome.
Because I love competing. I love
accessible competition. which
Absolutely.
was a hallmark of SSX,
Yeah.
right? You didn't need to be a snowboarder or know anything about the sport.
No.
But you could have tons of fun and compete with your pals in that.
Absolutely.
And the AI. Yeah.
And you know what was great about it was you felt like you were pretty good at it going in.
Right.
But yet you never felt like you perfected it.
It was a weird game for Electronic Arts. It was a weird game because EA was really pushing towards realism and authenticity with their relationships with all the leagues and the sports.
Oh yeah.
And SSX is far from realistic.
Oh yeah.
But it honors the sport of snowboarding in a wonderful way, and it's almost like this arcadey blast that just felt so funky and so organic and poppy,
If I would say there's one theme to almost everything that I've been passionate about in my life, it's making things larger than life.
Right.
And what makes, I think, SSX so great, and the same I think would go for Street Volume 2.
Yep.
Which is, at its core, it feels like you're really in control.
Yeah.
You don't feel like, you're hitting a button and a bunch of crazy stuff. You feel like you're doing it.
Yeah.
So there's a plausibility to it, and that comes from amazing physics, great gameplay, great camera systems, and, it looks simple, but it's a lot of work to make it look that simple.
Right.
But on top of it, with SSX, we said, as we were designing the courses, if we didn't have to worry about a budget in the real world, if we could spend $100 million to build a course like Metro City, if we didn't have to worry about killing people, because missing a 200-foot gap isn't going to be good for your body.
No.
But if you just give yourself the permission to forget about those things, then what you create feels, when it's done well, like you are actually doing it.
Right.
You feel a sense of accomplishment. You feel a belief in these worlds. And the weird part is, when we first released the game and you had these courses and they were in cities, or there was giant production and signage and grandstands and jumbotrons, people laugh. Oh yeah, that's so ridiculous. There'll never be anything like that. But you look at a border cross race in the Olympics or in the X Games or a big air contest.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like it now.
I mean, honestly, SSX was EA's opportunity to have like their own Tony Hawk and their franchise. And to their credit, they did make a bunch of different games, but it seemed to get away from them because they lost the purity that your team was able to kind of find. And do you think it just got too expensive to make the games, or did they just try to change it too much and deviate too much, or had they explored everything that they could have?
It's something I thought a lot about over the years, because I ended up, after SSX 3, leaving SSX, and I left that in the hands of my predecessor, and I went into a more global role, working with a lot of the studios around the world.
Yep.
And I tried to figure out, why did I actually do that? Because I really, and maybe it was ego and
You
wanting a
wanted to
bigger
challenge yourself,
title,
sure, yeah.
and all that crappy stuff you have to go through in life before you figure that part out. But what it was is, EA does some things incredibly well.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly good at developing properties, sequeling properties, and EA Sports Big came out of left field for them.
Yeah.
So we launched it with SSX, and SSX only came to be because a couple of folks who ran our studio here in Canada at the time, Don Matrick, who oversaw the studios worldwide, and Paul Lee, who was then GM of our studio, they gave me a lot of rope to go do this.
Yeah.
We used to have this concept at EA, if you were an executive producer, called a silver bullet. And if your last game was a hit and it exceeded its targets, then you had a silver bullet, which meant you could go make a game.
Right.
And you could kind of, put your neck on the line. And if you succeeded again, then you got another silver bullet. And if you didn't, well, you didn't get as much rope. But those two folks were really instrumental in creating an atmosphere where I could have a lot of rope. And we also created a different culture around how we built that game.
Yeah.
And because at that time, most of EA's games were rated 70 to 75, and they were okay. Great brands, great marketing, good games. But we targeted making a game that internally we used to describe it as Nintendo quality.
Right.
First party Nintendo.
Yes.
And we said we need to be 90 plus rated. And we actually launched the first SSX in Japan first with the launch of PlayStation 2. And we said, you know what? We want to be the first Western game, to break the ceiling with a magazine like, Super Famitsu in Japan.
Right on.
So we set a high bar, and we had a team that really bought into it. And everybody in their own areas was creatively challenged, On the audio side, people were trying to do things that had never been done before, which we did. I mean, there were 24 tracks of streaming audio at any given time.
Amazing. How big was the team on the first game? I looked at the credits on SSX3, and it was pretty big. There was,
it got bigger each time.
About 60 people or something like that.
Even bigger, I think.
I mean, how many on the first SSX?
I think by the time we were done, maybe 40.
Okay. That's not tiny, but that's still minuscule compared to
teams
something
were
now.
just really starting to scale up.
Yeah.
And I think it just about doubled for SSX3.
Yeah.
Because we took this approach of an open mountain.
Mm-hmm.
But all the core values were the same.
Yeah.
And so I think what happened, and that was at the end of the day, I didn't create one course. I didn't create a single character. I didn't pick a single song. I was there to help shape the vision.
Right.
And then to make sure what we were building was right for the vision.
Right.
And
was it a case of, because you kind of pitched this concept initially, right? You brought it to Don and to the other team members.
I pitched it to Don the first time I met him.
Right.
I'd never made a video game.
Right.
I met him.
That's amazing. I mean, that speaks to the risk-taking that Don Matrick was able to do back then.
Oh,
right?
yeah. He had a well, I came from, at that point, a background in creating brands and in marketing, and then in production and making music videos and commercials and TV shows. But along the way, I had also created the actual event of Border Cross in the real world.
Yeah.
And so when I met Don, and it's kind of an odd story, but I actually met him because my wife wanted to move from Los Angeles home to Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll see if I can get a job. So through another friend, I met Don, and I said, look, I've done all this video work for Reebok around fitness, and I've created this other sport, and I had actually gone into Illustrator, which I was really bad at, and I made a mock Genesis box, Sega Genesis box called Border X, and I flipped it over, and then it was this interactive fitness idea.
Oh wow!
And I
thank God that didn't take off, eh?
Anyway, I showed it to him, and he said, "Well, those are interesting, but
why don't you let someone else make the hardware? And
would you be interested in sort of getting going and cutting your teeth? How about on making a soccer game?"
Yeah.
And I went, "I love soccer." So
did you?
Yeah, I did.
Or was that the marketer in you then?
No, I did. I played it as a kid.
Cool.
And
so you helped to make this little game called FIFA.
Well, I was just one of many people.
I know.
At that point, Bruce McMillan was the powerhouse behind FIFA. My first game was FIFA for the Super Nintendo.
Wow.
Which I got.
And you had worked at Sega on the Genesis as well, right?
I hadn't worked at Sega, so as a commercial director and producer, in video, one of the jobs we had taken on, and we'd done numerous videos for Sega.
Nice.
For CES back then.
Okay.
I'm actually a game show host in one of them.
No way.
A maniacal game show
my God.
host. But through that, I got reintroduced to games and got a Genesis.
Did you make commercials that we saw around the Sega Genesis? Did they air on television? Or
not on the broadcast side. They would have been ones at the shows.
That's awesome.
But lots of other. Oh my God, I could show you reels and reels of bad music videos and goofy commercials. And
that's cool. But so when you got into SSX, that was basically the entree into building your own platform at Electronic Arts and really giving yourself a stage to kind of and so I would imagine that you passed this vision off to all of these artists and programmers and designers, and they had to build a game that you maybe didn't build with them, but you had to kind of make sure it felt right for you.
Yeah. So for me, I've always, at the core of everything I do is a DJ.
Yeah.
And, and that DJ is all about curation. But, I think of that in the sense of what you see, what you hear,
Right.
and more importantly, what you feel.
Right.
And as my wife often likes to remind me, I'm much more of a feeler than I am a thinker.
Yeah.
I can think a thought, but it doesn't really mean a lot to me till I essentially feel it. And so a lot of SSX early on was about a feeling.
Right.
And, sharing that with people, figuring out ways to prototype pieces of it, bring it to life. And, as more and more people got involved and we were open to new ideas and ways to do things, that led to some of the really out-of-the-box stuff like having, Rozelle, the human beatbox, in there as the in-game announcer.
Yeah.
And having, having some of the moments that just felt, hidden shortcuts, things like that just felt like things you had never done before. And
do you think when you were transitioning away or sort of riding the ladder at EA that was kind of, the end of EA Sports Big?
Well, I think it's funny how much I've seen about, the rise and fall of EA Sports Big in recent years. I think what it came from...
I think we can collectively say that we really miss that brand, and it was because we know how much money the EA Sports brand makes for the company, it was almost like a give back to the gaming community.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, we haven't forgotten you. We're going to make some silly sports stuff too for you to just have fun with,
Yeah, you know what? The words that come to mind for me are joyful,
Yeah.
Gratuitously entertaining, but yet at their core, they're amazingly competitive.
Right.
And you feel like you have a great sense of control to do amazing things. But
it's such a genius brand for EA to have, and it boggles the mind why it's not there still.
Well, I think in looking back, the reason it died is a pretty obvious one. And it is, at that time, EA was what it was. And there was a model that it knew really well, which it had made itself very successful on.
Right.
Which was, if you have something good, you keep bringing it out. And at that point, it was you bring it out in an annualized way.
Yes.
And I think for me, that was the reason I actually ended up stepping away after SSX 3. And for the most part from the big brand, because when we did, we had an amazing 1-2 punch in launching big. First, out of our group, which was called Chaos, we had SSX. And then I think we had Tricky, followed by NBA Street Volume 2.
Right.
And that in itself is a masterpiece.
Yes, it is.
And
is that your favorite game that you've worked on?
In some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. The team on it was equally as passionate as the folks on SSX. And again, what I love is the team involved a whole different set of skills. They reached out to people outside of gaming who brought in different points of view. Guys like Jimmy Smith, who had masterminded some great street basketball content at Nike, which led to bringing in Bobito, which led into, between those guys, a whole, a masterful feeling of old school hip hop.
Yep.
And on the gameplay side and on the visual side, having a very stylistic approach, which, to your earlier point, EA was going, more and more and more photorealistic.
Right, of course. Yeah.
And I remember presenting the game at a meeting of the senior execs and them looking at it going, well, why is it so cartoony?
Yeah.
Yeah. We need this to look more photorealistic. And luckily, I was able to say, well, this is how it looks because this is different.
Yeah.
And whether you want to believe it or not, I believe this is really cool.
That's awesome. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask Steve Rechtschaffner about working on these EA Sports big titles or anything else, you can ask him. You can pry about the new company that he's going to build. Go ahead and ask that in the chat, and we'll get to him as much as we want. And that includes you, DG. I know that you don't think that we're making a live show. We're making a live show, buddy. So please go ahead and ask us any questions. Just keep it all caps for us, okay? And Blake, help me out if I miss anything cool. I want to talk a little bit about transitioning to the next stage in your life when you started to look at other EA. Did you get a different sense of the business at that point? Was it
more
about dollars and cents for you?
Yeah, what it was for me. So when we initially, coined this brand, EA Sports Big, and had a couple of great products out.
Yeah.
I was asked to essentially be the I believe it was godfather of Big.
Yep.
And so I said, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I get to decide when the games are ready to go out, or no? We just need you to help the other teams. And there was a couple of other teams already working on ideas down in Redwood Shores.
Right. Where was Shocks made? I always used to love that game.
That I don't remember.
Yeah, I know it wasn't a Vancouver game.
So I think part of it was, every one of the 3 SSX games that we worked on within Chaos were all 90 plus rated.
Right.
Street Volume 2 was 90 rated. And my approach to it was, you don't put out a new game till you know you can deliver something that both has freshness, newness, and can be at that quality level.
Yeah.
And I could see that the cadence I was being asked to deliver at, we need another one for next Christmas. I'm like, it's not ready.
Yeah.
People haven't, Nintendo doesn't put a new Mario out every year.
Right.
And I don't pretend that we were Mario, but we were a fantastical experience.
Yeah.
That wanted to give you things you had never done before.
Well, and that, honestly, that's the curse of Tony Hawk as well. They did the same thing to Tony. They put too many of those games out in quick succession, and what Nintendo does better than anybody is they create, even if we know these games are coming, you can guess what there is going to be revealed at E3 pretty much every year, but they make you want them.
Yeah.
They create anticipation and expectation and desire, and if this stuff is so annualized that you just can count on it, it gets numbing after a while.
But that, for me, is what's so exciting about what's happening today in games.
Yeah.
Because games are basically ongoing services now. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to think about,
That's a dirty word for a lot of people, though, right? There's a lot of people that are so against this idea of, publishers and developers keeping their hands out for more money and more money. The people are on the other side saying, I just want to pay once and get the whole game. And there's a lot of developers and publishers that are trying to go out there right now and say, we don't do the microtransactions, and we don't, we're not doing games as service. Are you nervous about that side at all, or?
No, not at all.
No?
I mean, change, everybody's always on a different part of the wheel when it comes to change.
Right.
For me, an analogy is, I I can admit this publicly, I watch a lot of TV.
Yeah.
I love great television.
Sure.
And if a show grabs me, whether I can binge watch it or whether I've got to wait till it comes out, I keep coming back.
Right.
My relationship develops over time.
Right.
It's not a one-time transaction that you've got to convince me.
Right.
Like
and certainly games are doing that now too, right?
Yeah,
as much as we're, there's a vocal group that is up in arms about this new model for games. There's a lot of success in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I look back on the first 3 SSX titles, I think collectively between them, we probably sold about 7 million copies.
Right.
I think if you were to bring out, and not that this is exactly what my plan is, but if you were to bring out SSX today in a free-to-play model, especially with the amount of personal expression we had personal expression through the characters back then.
Right.
That you didn't control.
Right.
And I think the numbers would be amazing because a lot of people were reticent to spend that kind of money.
Yes.
On a game about snowboarding.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know if they would like it. And most of it was word of mouth.
Right.
And if you take away that barrier to accessibility, and you can just, if you're on a platform like, Stadia or EA streaming platform and you're a subscriber, well, who's ever, and you can just try it.
Yeah.
I'm willing to risk that if you try a new game that's made with the same values and passion and entertainment value and controls, that we can hook you. And I think it's interesting how things go full circle, but one of the people that was on the SSX team is friends with the folks who made Rocket League.
Okay.
And I was telling him, I'm really inspired by Rocket League.
Yeah.
It's action, it's arcadey, but it's hard, it's competition. And I can keep playing it over and over and over. I love competing at it. He goes, well, those folks were inspired by SSX.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be inspired by them because I think what they've done, they capture all kinds of gamers. They've got PC gamers, console gamers, and I was at a huge arena-sized esports event about a year and a half ago.
For Rocket League?
It was one of the games being played.
Right.
But what was so cool is when they shift games, like a third of the arena would leave.
Yeah.
Except when Rocket League came on.
Because it's so easy to watch.
Everybody liked it.
Right.
Everybody watched it. It's kind of like, it's like everybody's kind of, side hustle.
The thing about Rocket League, and it's that sports dynamic which makes it kind of refreshing and different from a lot of the other stuff out there. Everything that's called esports out there, there's a lot of shooters or tactical strategy action games, but Rocket League is truly a sports game. But it's also not free to play. There's a price tag at the beginning which isn't too high,
No.
and you get a big chunk of game, but if you want to embellish, you can spend a little bit more. I think that feels a little better to the traditional community. But I also agree with you. I think you're absolutely correct that games have been priced way too high for way too long, and they have had this ridiculous barrier to entry.
Well, I don't exactly mean that.
Yeah.
I think for some people, that really works.
Yeah.
And if that was the only model, but what I think it does is it stops a lot of people from trying
Right,
things because
right.
you're so deeply invested. Imagine you're picking a series on HBO or on Netflix. Well, forget about their business models, but imagine you've got to pay for every episode up front before you've ever watched a single episode.
Yes.
A lot of people aren't going to sample those shows.
Right.
A lot of shows won't get discovered.
Right.
And so what I really like is just all these new technologies and all these new business models have re-inspired me to want to make the kinds of games that I'm passionate about, but in new ways
That's cool.
that I think more people can discover than ever.
Right.
And be competing with people, cross town or around the world, and can have these over-the-top, visual and audio joy fests.
Awesome.
And that's,
Do you have the connection still in the industry that you can, bring this out into the marketplace at the scale that you would want to? Like,
Yeah.
Your name associated with anything close to like an SSX creates massive expectation. Like, that's what we want. We want there to be this amazing, never-ending SSX experience.
Well, I've spent quite a bit of time in the last half year doing two things.
Yeah.
One, reconnecting to a number of people who I'd like to be part of the core team that helped shape this.
Cool.
And two, spending time with the leaders at the organizations that we potentially would partner with and say, here's the vision. Is this something you could be interested in?
Nice.
And I think they all have their own needs around streaming and subscription or free to play. And so those pieces really make it feel like the timing is right.
Right.
So what we'll be doing is the next 2 months are really about locking the team down. Early fall is going to be around just we have a number of concepts that we've been playing around with and focusing it down to one or two.
Right.
And then from there, starting to prototype. And then from there, we'll re-engage and see who makes the best potential partner for us. Because all of these services that are going out right now, from what I see, are largely depending on existing games and the way games are currently built.
Right.
And I think by having something that you can just jump into,
Right.
that's immediately engaging, I think it can really be a zig to the industry's zag.
And I don't know if SSX or a similar kind of idea is, we all hope it is, but there is a direct and distinct absence of that as a play style out there. And there are snowboarding games and things, but they don't lean heavily enough into the fantasy. And so every time we as reviewers get our hands on them, we're like, well, there's some stuff in here that kind of makes you feel similar to SSX, but it's not SSX.
Well, even what the later SSX has lost is its curation.
Yeah.
It's about, there's a rhythm and a flow that takes a lot of work to create.
Right.
And it goes back to that same DJing concept.
Yeah.
You've got to have those moments put together in such a way. They're crafted. It's
Yeah.
really, really crafted. In the same way, when somebody builds a track for a new Formula One race, there's crafting that goes into that.
Right.
And It's the same thing. So it's you know, I can tell you, yes, there is an idea based in snow.
Yeah.
There's an idea based in water.
Cool.
There's an idea based on, I'll call it motorized things you can drive and ride.
Okay.
And then there's a concept around a traditional sport,
Cool.
which is highly competitive, which you play head-to-head, done in an over-the-top,
Right.
action, arcade-oriented way.
Awesome.
So we're starting this up. This is not about just a title. We obviously have to start with a title.
Yep.
But for us, it's about making a sequence of titles and really becoming known as a group and as a studio
That's amazing.
that can bring that to the world. And you know what? The good news is the people in the core part of this team have done it.
Right.
And now,
So you're working with some of your colleagues from back in the big days?
yes, I will be.
That's
but
fantastic.
not we're not putting the old band back together.
No.
You know, I'm equally excited with working with a whole bunch of new people I've never worked with before.
Right on.
And you know, it's that's where the conversations have gone on. You know, who's at the right place in their life that really wants to take on a challenge like this? This is going to be some heavy lifting.
For sure. One of the things that, of course, my mind is reeling right now. One of the things that I always respected so much about SSX in particular was the character creation. You guys spent so much time with the voices and the style and the challenges. And because we were racing on snow, even though there were lots of Mario Kart copycats, the engine sounds and the explosion sounds would always drown out the voices. But on snow, you could hear the chatter, you could hear the interplay. And so you built these characters that could transpose. You could put them into other kinds of things. Is that something that you're possibly thinking about?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the games were ahead of their time in terms of what you did with your character in game triggered a lot of reactions and dialogue from your competitors as well as yourself. It was, I think, an early form of self-expression within a game.
For sure.
And we also saw a lot of that in Street, where, you know, if you're really on a guy and you'll start to piss him off.
That was
and they'll
amazing.
start to behave. So that's a big part of it. But one of the parts I'm most excited about is empowering the user to decide how and when they want their characters to express themselves, but through things they're doing in the game or achieving in the game. Because I think, you know, playing some of the games currently where I can get my character to do something really fun based on me doing something in game rather than just triggering an animation, that feels like I'm doing it.
That's awesome.
And I like that.
That's awesome. I do have some questions here. Game Freak 84, who came up with the name SSX Tricky? Did someone on the team just love that song?
I did.
Okay.
And I'll tell you exactly how I did that. And there aren't a whole lot of things I would say I did, but so in my past, I was the creative and marketing director for Swatch Watch.
Right.
I did that for the first 7 years of the brand. And one of the things I did there was help support and launch the first ever hip-hop tour.
Cool.
And that was Fat Boys, Nucleus, Houdini, Run DMC, and Curtis Blow.
Nice.
So I spent a lot of time hanging around with Run DMC.
Right on.
And so I had an old mixtape, or I guess it was probably a CD by then.
Right.
And we were thinking about, because we knew we were introducing a lot more tricks into the Tricky version. And I literally was driving from my house in West Vancouver to the studio in Burnaby one morning, and I'm rocking out to Tricky, you know, looking like the goofy, you know, white guy I am, and and I went, it's Tricky, and I went, it's Tricky,
Yeah,
and I came in and I was just on fire, going, I got the name.
That's great.
And then we had the song, and it was very funny reaching back out to Russell Simmons and Lior, who I knew from
a
10
different
years
world,
before,
right,
going,
yeah.
hey, here's what I'm doing now, and hey, can I license your song? And they were like, sure.
They
and,
must have flipped.
and I said, well, do you have the I need the 24-track master, because we're going to tear it apart. And anyway, I think we got a really good value on that, because
Right.
but it also, I think, brought the song back to the forefront.
For sure.
I think back then they got a lot of downloads, back when people paid for that.
That's awesome. I've got a question from S Block 2. You say that you are a DJ. What tracks are in your set, and can you put a link to your mixtape in the show notes?
Well, the stuff I play today is so weird and goofy. My most recent playlist that I've been sharing out with friends, I call Que Sera on Spotify. And it is basically
Doris Day in that one?
No, but it was inspired by Sly and the Family Stone's cover of Que Sera.
No way.
So I started just put it together over a couple of months, and I just started looking for odd covers.
Cool.
Or really weird. I have a penchant for melancholy music.
Right.
And that's the kind of weird stuff I'm into. You don't want to dance to it. You just kind of want to chill to it, or just get kind of slowly depressed to it. But yeah, I do. When I still DJ now, it's live and at parties, and boy, that'll cover anything from, I'll pull on 6 generations or 6 decades of music.
Did you DJ the reunion?
Oh yeah, I did a little bit there.
Nice.
Just a little bit.
That's nice.
Actually, Johnny Morgan was there, who really was the guy who had a big hand in SSX music, both helping curate it as well as making a lot of the tracks in there.
And Steve invited me to that reunion, and
Yeah.
I wanted to go so bad.
You had a valid excuse.
My wife and my daughter were both sick, and they were both, I think, throwing up during that weekend. And I was like, well, I can't leave my wife and kid to go to a party. I had to stay home and help them a little bit. But I was so disappointed because there hasn't been one since you guys made the game, and that was it. And so, but now it sounds like there might be more.
Well, a lot of people that worked at EA Canada and in the Chaos team moved here from all parts of the world.
Right.
But almost all of them have stayed. Well, Vancouver is an amazing place.
Yes.
But yeah, it was so interesting getting them all back together.
Yeah.
Because, and it was oddly clicky in the old way that it used to be.
Yep.
But yeah.
One of my buds is Clint Hansen, and I saw that he's the technical art lead or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Genius guy.
Brilliant.
If you are watching this and you worked on SSX, thank you. From not just me, but from everybody that's watching this stream or this archive. You made lots and lots of game players very happy, and thank you very much. And I do hope that we get more, man. I really do. I've got a good one here from SamIM111, who always comes up with great questions for us. What are your favorite unlockables and or Easter eggs in all of the EA big titles that you worked on? And I think you're expected to remember the code for how you can get to that.
My favorite was in the very first game.
Yeah.
And it was only an unlockable, but it was to me so momentous and so different than the rest of the game. And that was when you completed, I can't remember what the last track you had to beat was in the sequence of tracks, but they were all highly curated tracks, right? You had a course, you had a couple of alternative paths, but when you got to the end, it unlocked what I think we called Untracked. And all of a sudden, instead of being at the top of this course with all these grandstands and well-defined course, you were just being dropped by a helicopter in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And that had never happened in a game.
That really was SSX3, wasn't it?
It was a precursor because you had never had, where do I go?
Yeah.
And you really felt like you could go anywhere. And also, an old music producer friend of mine from Los Angeles had made the track to that. And it was so ethereal, and nothing was ethereal in there. It was all Adam Mackay-Smith, who had a lot to do with the music and a lot of the weird, quirky stuff in the first one. Super creative guy who also happens to be Johnny Canuck.
Nice.
He used to describe the music in the game as fun music that kicks ass. Awesome. This ethereal tune, when you unlocked it, it was like you were high.
Yeah.
It was like you're just like, wow. And so for me, that stands above the rest, because it just awesome. it was even. I knew it was there, and it still felt like a magic moment to me.
I'm imploring anyone that can speak with the brass at Electronic Arts to connect with Steve and let him go nuts with this whole idea, and not, with these brands that we already know. Half the work is done in their awareness out there.
Oh no, you know what?
They're sitting. You can make new ones for sure.
Oh no, we you know what? I shouldn't say we. I've spent some time talking to some of the leaders at EA as well as other companies there, and you know what? There's some amazing people there now
for sure
who are interested in making some great games. So, there's a possibility they end up being who we work with.
Cool.
But I don't think it matters on what the specific theme is as a starting point,
Well,
or even what the specific name is. Or do you?
I think it does.
Okay.
And there's two reasons why. I think that you were the originator of not just a game, but an ethos and a vertical within Electronic Arts. And Electronic Arts has been in a lot of trouble in the eyes of a lot of game players out there, and they need titles, especially like this, to help kind of sway public opinion about the kind of game company that they will be going forward into the future. You know, games as service doesn't need to be something that has any, stigma attached to it. It can turn things around, and I say this all the time, that this is a business that's always reinventing itself and trying to figure out how to find its paths. This is an extraordinary idea and an extraordinary direction to take something like games.
Okay, I am officially making you an honorary member of our business development team. That was an incredible pitch. I'm in. I'm in.
I've been doing this for a little while, and I would love to see SSX come back, and I would love to see NBA Street come back, and I love the FIFA Street franchise, and we're talking about shocks and everything in here. I just want to see you get back to work making us wonderful things.
I am. I'm enjoying my last few weeks of having control over my schedule, because I know it's going to be at least 5 or 6 years.
Remember this tan, everybody. It's going to fade.
I'll be really pale the next time you see me. Thanks for having me in.
Oh, thank you. Guys, we actually have to end the show there as well, because the cafe has got an event that's coming up, so we have to clear out of here. So that's going to do it for our episode of EP Live. We'll be back again on Wednesday with a brand new episode for you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Steve.
And can I just say before we leave,
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being such a big supporter of the games industry, such a big supporter, personally for me, of the games I've worked on. And I know there were a lot of people disappointed that you weren't able to make the reunion, but you've had a huge role in being a promoter, a cheerleader, a passionate lover of games, and I'm so excited to see you doing what you're doing now and having this platform to reach people on, so thank you for that.
You are a sweet man. Thank you. All right, you guys, we'll see you very soon, and until then, play forever.